Saturday night, May 3rd, 2026. T-Mobile Arena, Las Vegas. David Benavidez steps into a cruiserweight title fight, a division 25 pounds heavier than where he made his name. And in 6 rounds, he doesn't just win. He dismantles a 48-fight veteran and becomes the first boxer in history to win world titles at 168, 175, and 200 pounds. And if that wasn't enough drama for one night, Canelo Alvarez was sitting ringside. The man who spent years refusing to fight Benavidez, in the building, watching. When his face appeared on the video board, the crowd booed him 3 separate times. In the post-fight interview, Benavidez looked into the camera and said, "I see Canelo in the building. Do you want to see Canelo versus Benavidez?" The arena answered for him. So who is David Benavidez? And how does a kid from one of the toughest neighborhoods in Phoenix end up making history while his biggest rival watches from a ringside seat? Let's go back to the beginning. Phoenix, Arizona, December 17th, 1996. Maryvale, West Phoenix, a neighborhood that doesn't make headlines for the right reasons. David Benavidez was born into a family that understood that the street was always an option and that boxing was the answer to it. His father, Jose Benavidez Sr., was a Mexican immigrant who had escaped a youth marked by gang involvement before landing in Phoenix and dedicating his life to the sport. He started putting gloves on his sons before they could read. David started boxing at 3 years old. Not metaphorically, 3 years old. But here is something that doesn't get talked about enough. By age 12, David Benavidez weighed 260 pounds. The stress of his parents' divorce, the weight of Maryvale pressing down on a kid who hadn't figured out how to carry it yet. He ate. He ballooned. And the boxing career that his father had been building looked like it might be over before it started. It took him 2 years to lose the weight. 2 years of discipline at an age when discipline is the hardest thing in the world to find. He came out the other side leaner, hungrier, and built for fighters in every sense of the phrase. His amateur record was a tight 15-0, kept minimal deliberately because his father didn't want the amateur habits corrupting the professional style he'd spent years installing. August 17th, 2013. Rocky Point, Mexico, 16 years old. David Benavidez made his professional debut because he was too young to get a boxing license in the United States. He had to go to Mexico to fight. He stopped his opponent in the first round. The second fight, same result. The third, same. He was a teenager destroying professionals. And the boxing world started paying attention. By 2015, he signed with Samson Boxing and continued tearing through the rankings with a knockout rate that made matchmakers nervous. He sparred with elite fighters, Gennady Golovkin, Kelly Pavlik, Peter Quillen, as a teenager, and held his own. His older brother, Jose Jr., was the name in the family at the time, but the younger Benavidez was coming. Then came September 8th, 2017. 20 years old, fight 19 of his professional career. A vacant WBC super middleweight title on the line against Romanian contender Ronald Gavril. 12 hard rounds, a split decision, 2 judges for Benavidez, 1 for Gavril. And at 20 years and 8 months old, David Benavidez became the youngest super middleweight world champion in boxing history. In his first defense, he took the rematch against Gavril in February 2018. This time it wasn't close. Unanimous decision, dominant performance. 21 years old, undefeated, world champion. The future had officially arrived. September 18, 2018. A random out-of-competition drug test administered by the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association, part of the WBC's clean boxing program, came back positive. The substance benzoylecgonine, the primary metabolite of cocaine. Benavidez was 21 years old, the reigning undefeated WBC super middleweight champion of the world. He was stripped of the title and handed a 4-month suspension through February 2019. He didn't make excuses. He stood in front of the cameras and said, "It was a mistake. I was not an addict. It was not going to happen again." What he also said later, with the kind of honesty that's uncomfortable to hear from someone that young, was this: "I love boxing so much. Seeing everyone have their glory while I was suspended, I know I could have been right there. It just made me more upset that I was that stupid to make that kind of mistake." He was also stripped of his title a second time in August 2020, this time for missing weight by 2.8 pounds against Romer Angelo. The same fighter who had just overcome one of the most humiliating moments of his career, then went out and stopped Angelo in the 10th round anyway. The belt, he'd already lost. The W still on the record. That tells you something about David Benavidez. The obstacle wasn't enough. He still performed. March 2019. Benavidez returned to the ring and stopped Jillian Love in 2 rounds. Back on track. November 9th, 2019. Anthony Dirrell. WBC super middleweight title on the line. The belt that had been taken from him. Round 8 TKO, he got it back. Second title reign. Still undefeated. The monster was back. He kept building. David Lemieux, TKO in 3. Caleb Plant, a IBF world champion, beaten by unanimous decision. Demetrius Andrade stopped in 6. Every single fight, Benavidez walked forward, through volume, through power, and broke his opponents down. And the whole time, the boxing world kept asking one question: when does he fight Canelo Alvarez? Because Saul Canelo Alvarez was the undisputed super middleweight champion, the biggest name in the sport. And Benavidez was right there, aggressive, undefeated, power in both hands, a natural rival. The fight made itself. The fans demanded it. The boxing media debated it for years. It never happened. Canelo took fights against other opponents. The negotiations went nowhere. The years passed. Benavidez started talking about it at every press conference. The frustration became part of his brand. The fighter who was forged by pressure, but couldn't get the biggest fight in the sport. So he moved up. June 2024, Alexander Gvozdyk at light heavyweight, 1. February 2025, David Morrell Jr., WBA light heavyweight title, won by decision. April 2025, WBC light heavyweight title after Dmitry Bivol vacated, 1. November 2025, Anthony Yarden. Stopped him in 7. Now a 2-division champion at 175 pounds and still no Canelo fight. Then came May 3rd, 2026. And Benavidez decided to make history louder than anyone could ignore. Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez was a 48-fight, 2-time world champion. He had never been stopped before. Not once, in 50 professional fights. David Benavidez stopped him in 6 rounds. Round 4, a right-hand staggered Ramirez. Benavidez went for the finish and settled for a knockdown in the closing seconds. Zurdo down on his left knee. Round 5, Benavidez kept closing the eye, kept landing the combinations, kept making it ugly. Round 6, another devastating combination. Ramirez went to a knee again. He didn't beat the count, The fight was over at 2:59 of round 6. WBA Cruiserweight title. WBO Cruiserweight title, and a place in boxing history that no fighter had ever occupied before. World champion at super middleweight, light heavyweight, and cruiserweight. The first ever, made under pressure, and proved it in front of 25-pound heavier men. And then he looked at the crowd and he said Canelo's name, with Canelo in the building. The crowd booed the man who wouldn't fight him 3 times. Does the Canelo fight happen now? Probably not. Canelo is likely heading to different territory, and the weight discrepancy between 168 and 200 is real. But the point isn't whether the fight happens. The point is what Benavidez did to make sure the conversation never dies. He went to 200 pounds. He made history. He stood undefeated at 32-0 with 26 knockouts. He delivered the performance of his career on the most symbolic weekend in Mexican boxing, Cinco de Mayo, with a man who spent years avoiding him watching from the front row. Some fighters chase greatness. David Benavidez builds it, wall by wall, knockdown by knockdown, suspension, and comeback and suspension and comeback. The monster doesn't stop. And after Saturday night, he doesn't have to anymore. This is KKE, built for fighters. See you on the next one.